How would you explain the difference between a maimed and a sicha? First of all, I already addressed this question in the Stump the Rabbi series, which is also available online on YouTube and in other places. But I'll address it again here, at least in short. And I'm going to make 2 points. The first is a more spiritual point, and the other, I guess, is a more practical point. The more spiritual point is that you have a Sicha from the Rebbe Rashab, which I have here. The Rebbe Rashab said a Meimer Simchas Teire Tov Reish Samach Vov, which started at about 1 o'clock in the morning. And before he started the Meimer, he said to himself the following words: Milmata Lamayla, or the Milmayla Lamata, Chassidus Daf Men Reden, from the bottom up or from the top down, Chassidus needs to be spoken. That's a quote from the Rebbe Rashab. Now, what does this quote mean? So I have here a Gemara in Masechta Psachim, Daf Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, where the Gemara discusses the difference between the expression LeDavid Mizmer and Mizmer LeDavid. And it says like this: LeDavid Mizmer, if the word David, to David come before the word Mizmer, Malamed, it teaches us, Sheshar Salav Shechina, first the Shechina rested upon him, then he said Shira. On the other hand, Mizmer LeDavid Malamed, if it says the Mizmer before LeDavid, it teaches us, Sha'al Shira, first he said Shira, Sheshar Salav Shechina, then the Shechina rested upon him. I believe that this quote from the Maimer in Samach Vov, and this Gemara explains the difference between a Maimed and a Sicha. A Maimed is Momayla Lamata. When the Rebbe says Chassidus, he starts from above, from Ruach HaKodesh, and it comes down to the Madrega of Seichel. When the Rebbe says a Sicha, he speaks Divrei Teire, and because he's Roy, Shetishra, love Shechina, so then there's an Inyan from Ruach HaKodesh that causes the Shechina Medaberes Mitech Gereine. And we know stories from many of the Rabbeim, including our Rebbe, which indicate that when the Rabbeim said Chassidus, they were in another world. The Alter Rebbe once looked at a Maimer that he himself said, and he was impressed with how orderly it was. The Mittler Rebbe once saw a Maimer that he had said, and he said that he had no recollection saying it. Because a Rebbe says Chassidus, he's Lamaila. In other words, the Ruach HaKodesh, which is above the human mind, above the mind altogether, rests. And that Ruach HaKodesh gives a Rebbe not just a inyan of Eid Eliki, but also a Hasaga, which comes on into the form of a Torah. And it's one of the great ployim of it is that it makes sense. When someone has Ruach HaKodesh and it comes down to Madrega of Seichel, it can quite logically be disorderly to someone other than this Baal Ruach HaKodesh, because he doesn't see what the Baal Ruach HaKodesh sees. Yet, Maimorei Chassidus, there's an incredible Koyach HaTzimtzum, L'mal Yusa, that the Maimorim come across as orderly. A Sicha is Torah, Divrei Torah, spoken from the mind, and the Ruach HaKodesh comes after. I think that's a spiritual interpretation of the difference between a Maimed and a Sicha. A practical difference between a Maimed and a Sicha is the following. The Alter Rebbe said 2,000 Maimorim during his lifetime. I was now in New Haven and I met a real maven who said to me that we don't have all the Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe. So I said to him, there's over 2,000 Maimorim in print. So he said to me, there's so many redundancies of Hanachas. So many Maimorim, we have more than 1 or 2 or even 3 versions in print. And when you add them all off, you realize that we have much less than the 2,000 Maimorim, which the Alter Rebbe said, as it's written in the Hayom Yom. The Alter Rebbe used to bring Psukim, or Maimorei Chazal, or occasionally a Lahavin Yenerin Sof, Lahavin Simchas Teire, and so on. And the Maimorim had a very uniform model. Questions, a biur, and answers. The Rabbeim after the Alter Rebbe, and even the Alter Rebbe himself, when he would say more than one Maimer on the same pasuk or Maimer Chazal and so on, there was a certain uniformity to it. There was a rigidity about it. All Maimorim seemed to conform to a certain constant model, a constant form. You see how the Rabbeim after the Alter Rebbe are very loyal. Same psukim, same questions, same biurim, same answers. But they add more questions. They elaborate much more on the questions. They elaborate much more on the biur. Sometimes they go in different directions, but there is a very rigid structure to the evolution of Chassidus Chabad in terms of Maimorim. If you study this, you'll realize that Chassidus Chabad is one of the most loyal models of evolution of Torah you'll find any place. 7 generations of Gedolei Yisrael speaking Divrei Torah that are all loyal to the father, to the Alter Rebbe. And it's incredibly consistent. And I heard from a good source that the Rebbe once showed Rebbe Label, Olav HaSholem, Zecheni Levracha, Maimer, and he showed him 6 versions. The Alter Rebbe, then the Mittel Rebbe, then Tzemach Tzedek, then the Rebbe Marash, then the Rebbe Rashab, and then the Friedrich Rebbe. There's actually Sichas of our Rebbe, where the Rebbe articulates what I'm sharing with you. And by the way, as I'm talking, I'm remembering, if you go to my website, inside Chassidus.org, and you go to my Rebbe page is very long. On that page, I have a number of classes on my Morim and Sichas, and I explore at length what I'm telling you here. I think I even have a PDF which supports it, which demonstrates it, and so forth. So my Morim have a very clear design that traces itself back until the Alter Rebbe. And Sichas are very different. First of all, by the earlier Rebbeim, Sichas were mostly Yoni Avoida. They weren't so much Torah. Our Rebbe spoke Sichas a lot, Divrei Torah, but there isn't the constraints that the Maimorim have. The Rebbe would say, without a doubt, that Maimorim are deeper than Sichas. The Rebbe said in the early years that the reason he starts the Fabrengen with the Maimer is because he wants people to be able to relax. And the Maimer is the intense part of the Fabreng, so by doing it first, people are able to relax after the Maimer is recited. But that's this different. Those are 2 different points that separate the Maimer from a Sicha.